This is the Untold Italy travel podcast, and you are listening to episode number 183.
Ciao a tutti and benvenuti to Untold Italy, the travel podcast where you go to the towns and villages, mountains and lakes, hills and coastlines of Bella Italia. Each week, your host, Katie Clark, takes you on a journey in search of magical landscapes, history, culture, wine, gelato, and of course, a whole lot of pasta. If you're dreaming of Italy and planning future adventures there, you've come to the right place.
Ciao, benvenuti friends. On this episode, I'm talking about a topic that I think is very important. And to be honest, it's taken quite a while to find just the right person who I could chat about it with. But I am delighted to say that I have found exactly the right person. And today we're chatting about wheelchair accessible and general accessibility issues when traveling in Italy. Now, if you've spent any time in our favourite country, then you may have wondered what it would be like to get around if you weren't fully mobile. In a place where many of us do over 20,000 steps a day, what is the experience for people who get around in a wheelchair or who have limited mobility? To be honest, the thought of it is quite daunting to me. But then in rolled my new friend, Aimee Maldonado, who is an absolute inspiration and is here today to share her amazing tips for getting around and having a fabulous time in Italy in a wheelchair. Aimee is based in the United States, but she also has an apartment in Florence, so she's truly living the dream in that respect and spends lots of her time in Italy exploring on her own in her manual wheelchair. Now, even if you're not concerned with mobility, this is a truly inspiring and eye-opening discussion about what is possible with incredible determination and tenacity. Aimee's got so many tips and bits of useful advice for you, so let's dive right in. Benvenuta, Aimee. Ciao, and welcome to the Untold Italy podcast.
Ciao, thank you for having me today.
Oh, I'm actually so thrilled to have you join us, Aimee, as we had a bit of a chat last week, and this conversation is well overdue. I'm so thrilled to have found you. But before we dive into our chat about accessible travel in Italy, can you share a little bit about your story, your background, and how you came to fall in love with and spend so much time in Italy?
Yes, I was born in the US. My parents are from Mexico, but I completely fell in love with Italy. I went the first time by accident, and then I never stopped going back. I loved it so much that now I've bought an apartment in Florence, and I go as often as possible. I am a full-time wheelchair user, so that surprises people sometimes as to how I get around, but I actually find it fairly accessible, and I tell everybody the three most inaccessible cities I've been to are actually in the US, and they're DC, New York, and Boston.
It's amazing, isn't it? You know, we have these assumptions about what works and what doesn't and how you can manage in different environments. But I think, you know, the best way to resolve some of these assumptions is to actually dive in and have a chat about what actually works and doesn't work when you're in a wheelchair. So, Aimee, but before we get onto that, can you just tell me what's the most favourite thing that you love about Italy? What is it? What makes your heart sing?
It's the people, it's the culture. To me, when I'm there, I feel at home. I tell people if there's such thing as past lives, I think I must have lived there.
I totally understand that feeling. Absolutely. All right. Yeah. It's one of those places that if you feel at home, you know, and I think a lot of the listeners that are listening today have that feeling too.
When I'm there, I feel at peace. I feel calm. I'm stress-free.
I love it. And it's so funny because a lot of people think, you know, Italy is this like hugely chaotic place, but it's been going on like that for a very long time and they've got their way of doing things. And as long as you know how to kind of navigate the cultural aspects and all of those things, then I do feel like you can fit right in very easily. Okay, so Aimee, I think, you know, most able-bodied people will probably take some of these things for granted, but we thought we would help everyone have an understanding of what are some of the challenges wheelchair users face when they're travelling in Italy, because even the short chat I had with Aimee before would open my eyes to so many things. So, Aimee, let's just have a go at some things that might be challenging about hotel stays in Italy.
First of all, I think we have to have a very open mind as to what accessibility is, because everybody's version of accessibility is different and everybody's needs are different. So it's going to vary from person to person. I try to be as open as possible, and what works for me might not work for somebody else. I start off with my wheelchair is a manual wheelchair. It's fairly light and it's fairly narrow, so I can fit in through a lot of doors that might not be very wide, that other wheelchair users might not be able to fit in through. So to start off, hotels, you always want to check for accessibility, but don't just go based on what it says. You have to ask the right questions. A hotel might say that there has an elevator, so then you make the assumption that it's wheelchair accessible. Well, in Italy and many places in Europe, there might be 2 or 3 steps to get to the elevator. So it does you no good that there's an elevator if there are steps without a ramp. Or there might be an elevator outside, but to get into the hotel, there might be 2 or 3 steps. So one of the things I do is try to look for pictures of the hotel where I could see kind of what the entrance looks like, if it's at street level, if not, if there's a ramp, or if there might be a side entrance where there might be a ramp. And then just ask. There's a hotel that I really like in Rome, and if you look at it from the outside, there's 3 steps to get in, but they have a ramp that they bring out, and it's not a problem staying there, and I love it.
Oh, what's the name of that hotel?
The Albergo del Senato, it's right in front of the Pantheon.
Oh, yes, I love that hotel. Wow, you wouldn't think necessarily that a hotel in that location would be accessible to wheelchair users, but that's great to know. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yes, and then one thing that I found in Italy in particular that's very interesting, sometimes when it's a wheelchair accessible room, it ends up having 2 restrooms inside. So that makes it really nice when you go with somebody else and 2 people are trying to get ready at the same time. You have 2 complete restrooms.
You probably don't get too many bonuses like that, so you got to take them when you can. That sounds good. I like having my own bathroom.
It's happened to me at 4 different hotels in Italy, and I think it's the most interesting thing.
So what are some other things that you need to think about at hotels? Because I can imagine, I'm just thinking about a hotel that I stay at sometimes near there, which is the Albergo del Sole, and it's got steps to get down into the main breakfast area.
And some hotels will, and then at that point, there's some that have ramps that they'll bring out, and then there's some that are willing to accommodate you. They'll say, well, we'll take your breakfast to your room, or we could set it up in this other part of the hotel. So then that depends on you, whether you're comfortable with that. I am very flexible with that. So to me, that would work. For many people, they feel like they want to be with everyone else, and that's understandable too.
Yeah, I do understand that. And some of these hotels are quite small. So even just thinking about that hotel, even if you were to get down into that area near the buffet, it would be actually quite hard to maneuver around, I think. So but I'm sure at that hotel, which I do love, is that the staff would go and help you and bring something to you.
And that's one thing that I found in Italy, and most of the hotels, the breakfast is set up buffet style, and all of the employees are always willing to help. And I'm like, what do you want? I'll go serve you. And I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. I can serve myself. But they're always willing to accommodate and help. And sometimes I do accept the help because it's just very busy and I don't want to be in the way or drop anything. So every time I do it differently, depending on the situation.
It sounds like you have to just be generally very flexible when you're traveling and in life, which, I think it's a good reminder for those of us that have fairly high expectations that flexibility is the key.
Yes, and then also it helps to know the measurements of your wheelchair, both the width and the depth of it. The reason you want to know that is because you want to know if the elevator doors are going to be wide enough if there's an elevator. Usually the room doors are not an issue, but in most places around the world, what I found is that the doors to go into the restroom tend to be narrower than the doors to go into the bedroom. So an issue might arise there.
And do you just email the hotels and ask them?
Again, I normally start off by looking at pictures and I've gotten pretty good at being able to tell if the door looks fairly wide or not, and if I don't see any pictures of what I need. And I also Google to see if there's any reviews from anybody that stayed in a wheelchair. When I do reviews, I try to put in there that I'm a wheelchair user so people kind of have an idea. But if not, then I will email the hotel and then ask them these questions.
Would you be using the standard booking sites to find those reviews, or is there something that's specifically dedicated to wheelchair users that you can access?
There are new services now that have started trying to cater to wheelchair users. I have not used them, so I don't know how reliable or how big of an inventory or selection they have. I normally just check on TripAdvisor, but also just do a general Google search.
Good to know. And I think, if you book on like booking.com, they do have accessible, you can eliminate things, shall we say, and so narrow things down rather than maybe make the final selection using them. They've got quite a few good filters there, but I mean, you can immediately see if it doesn't have an elevator, so they can be eliminated from your search. There's a lot of things to think about, isn't there?
Exactly. And again, just because it says wheelchair accessible, sometimes they mark that. It might not necessarily be accessible, so you want to double check all of those things.
Yeah. Aimee, remember when we were talking last week, you mentioned, I asked you, why don't you use an electric wheelchair? And you had a really good response.
So electric wheelchairs, I'm fortunate enough that I can use a manual one. Some people are bound to an electric one, and so they don't have the choice. But if you have the choice, I would use a manual one because it's easier. It's going to give you more flexibility. It's lighter and it's going to open up more accessibility because the manual ones tend to be smaller and more compact.
And you can collapse them as well, right?
Yes. So that's another thing. If I want to get around the city, normally I just roll around everywhere in smaller cities like Florence and Rome. Usually I just stay in the center and can roll around anywhere. But if I'm ever going to take a taxi, then I can take any taxi. I don't have to wait for an accessible one, which might be harder to find and might be non-existent in smaller cities. So I just can transfer from my chair into the taxi, and then the chair can be placed in the trunk or the back seat, whatever's most convenient at that point.
And now Italian taxi drivers have not maybe the best reputation, but have they always been helpful towards you?
I've never had an issue with any of them. They've always been very kind. They're always, willing to put the chair. I do a lot of traveling by myself. So if I'm by myself, I just jump in the taxi. They take care of putting the chair in the back. It's just a matter of me telling them how to collapse it and how to take the wheels off or whatever needs to be done.
I think it's worth mentioning that you also, your Italian is very good. So Aimee's studying, I think you do 2 lessons a week, right?
Yes, I do.
I guess that helps.
I will say that when I arrive, whatever city I'm arriving to, and that's just across the world, I like to have a private driver pick me up and take me to the hotel or wherever I'm staying, because when I get there, there's more suitcases, so it might be harder to fit the wheelchair and the suitcases, especially if I'm traveling with other people. Also, there might be strikes, and so I have my driver guaranteed, and I don't have to stand in a taxi line after a really long flight.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think it's good for everyone, really, but especially you don't want to be navigating taxis and big long queues with luggage because, when Aimee and I were talking before, it really had a lights on moment. Well, how do you actually move around with your luggage? And I was all of these realizations were coming to me, and I was kind of a bit disappointed in myself that I hadn't really thought about it before, but I can imagine just trying to navigate an airport with your luggage is a bit of a challenge too.
I travel a lot, so I have practice just kind of rolling it by my side or pushing it in front of me, but not everybody can do that. And one thing I found that in Italy in particular, they're very nice at the airport, and they help me from the time that they help me get on and off the airplane all the way to getting my suitcases, getting it off the conveyor belt, and then bringing the suitcase with me all the way to the taxi. Versus here in the US, they help me get off the plane, and then I'm kind of on my own.
Oh, Yeah, that's interesting. Do some of the airlines better than others, and is it mainly the airline staff and you could pre-order that, or is it typically just the ground staff?
The people that get you on and off the plane, those are run by the airport, so it's the ground staff, and it has nothing to do with the airline.
I know my parents are travelling later this year, and they're travelling on Emirates, and they do have services that you can pre-order. So, but I think it sounds like the ground staff in Rome are pretty excellent.
When you're traveling by air, you do have to let the airline know ahead of time that you're going to need wheelchair assistance, because they're the ones that book and communicate with the ground staff from the airport so that all of that's coordinated and they can get you on the plane.
Well, it's good to know that you get such a great welcome when you get to Italy. No wonder you love it so much. It's like, oh, I get help. People are helping me. Fantastic. Amazing.
In Florence, I already know all the ground staff by name.
Oh, wow. Do you fly straight into Florence, do you?
Generally, that's where I fly into.
Okay, well, I mean, that's where your apartment is, so I guess that's the best place to go. Now, what about trains, Aimee? Like, I can imagine, a lot of people find the prospect of getting on the trains and navigating the stations very difficult, even if they're not in a wheelchair. How do you manage the trains?
So the trains are also very easy to use. It's just a matter of organization. The first thing you have to do is, what I typically do is I look at the train schedule and kind of see what train I might want to take. I try to take the fast train versus the regional trains because they're just going to be more efficient and less stops. So once I kind of figure out the schedule that I want to take, then I send an email to the Sala Blu that's part of every train station. And you can find their email online. And you can also email the one in Rome, and then they'll direct you to wherever you need, or forward your email if you're going to go somewhere else. You need to contact them at least 24 hours before your train departs, or the train you want to take, because then they have to coordinate the service. So the first thing they have to do is make sure that the wheelchair accessible post is available, because there's just a limited amount of them. So they need to make sure there's not someone else that's already booked it. And as long as it's free, then they'll reserve it. If not, they'll tell you, well, that's not available. This is like the next closest train to that time. And they'll ask you generally if you have a blue card, which I don't because I live in the US, and I just explained that. And they will also ask you if you're traveling by yourself or with someone else. So if you're traveling with a companion, they can reserve up to, like, you and one person with you together, so that you have an assistant or just a companion with you. If it's, say, 3 people traveling, then they won't reserve for the third person. The third person has to make their own travel arrangements. Once I get that email confirmation, then I have to go to the train station and buy the ticket. So unfortunately, up to now, you cannot pay and buy the ticket online, but you have your reservation secure. So that's something I just figured out this year. Before, I used to go to the train station the day before and buy the ticket. Now I just get to the train station early the day I'm departing and buy the ticket, and then go to my meeting point. They usually ask me to be at the train station about 45 minutes before the train departs. The meeting point changes every time, even within Florence, even within Rome. So you have to read those instructions as to where they tell you to meet. Generally, they do not speak English at the Sala Blu, but you can use Google Translate to send that email, and usually you can figure it out.
So it sounds like it might be worthwhile getting some of those phrases and organising them before your trip if you're heading off, so you've got them ready to go.
Yes. And what I do now is, like, I have this email template that I just use every time. So I just look at the email that I sent the time before, and then I just change the dates, the times, and the train number.
Ah, very clever, very clever. And so La Sala Blu is the organisation that helps people in wheelchairs in Italy. Is that, or is it just related to the train station, or?
Just related to the train station. So it's with the Trenitalia.
Oh, that's a good point. So it's not with Italo, it's just with Trenitalia?
I've never used the Italo, but from my understanding, they have their own service system that you have to go through.
Okay, all right, yeah. I can understand why you just choose one and stick with it because you don't need to be learning anything else.
And they're also the ones that have the largest train schedule, so it's just easy.
Yeah, sure. And the spot on the train, is that comfortable? Is that in a nice place, or do they pop you near the bathroom?
So usually, I think it's usually carriage 3. And so it's in the, I guess what you would call the business section. So it's a little bit nicer. There is an accessible restroom. So one tip I would say is use the restroom on the train versus at the train station because it's easier to find an accessible restroom on the train than a lot of times at the train station. And then it's your choice. I usually transfer from my wheelchair into the seat, the train station seat, but you can stay in your wheelchair. They have it set up both ways. And the people from the train station from the Sala Blu, they'll help you with your luggage as well, like get in and out of the train with your suitcases and then walk you again to the taxi if you need.
Well, that's good to know that you get some help. I think it would be quite daunting to kind of try and manage that on your own, but I guess it's definitely about how to access that. And what I'll do is I will grab the email address of the Sala Bleu and put it in the show notes so people can go directly there if they want to. Right, you mentioned bathrooms, Aimee, and I think that's got to be one of the biggest things that, you know, would be very daunting going to another country. And Italy, again, is not very well renowned for having great bathrooms and accessible bathrooms, even for able-bodied people. So how do you go in your wheelchair if you want to use the bathrooms? Where do you go?
So again, that's going to be something of perspective. Is it a bathroom that's accessible, that has grab bars, that's special for wheelchair users? Yes, there are some. And one thing that I really like in Italy, when they do have wheelchair accessible restrooms, they are very respected versus in the US and in a lot of other countries, everybody wants to use the wheelchair restroom because it's bigger and it's more comfortable at airports. But in Italy, no, it's separate. It's usually kept locked. And even when it's not locked, people respect it and don't use it unless they are in a wheelchair or have some type of special need as to why they have to use it. Now, there aren't those restrooms everywhere, but usually you can find them at museums. And one thing in general, museums are usually free for wheelchair users in Italy. And so if it's an emergency and you need to go to the restroom, sometimes you can just run into the museum because they're not going to charge you. They let you skip the line, go in and out, use the restroom, and you've solved your problem. They're also at the big shopping centers. They will have wheelchair accessible restrooms. And I've found that a lot of the restaurants now have wheelchair accessible restrooms. There's even a restaurant in Rome where the restroom is downstairs, but they have an elevator that you could use to get down to it, which I think is amazing. And then in a lot of cities, maybe the restrooms are downstairs, but they will have the wheelchair accessible restroom in some part of the restaurant that's upstairs, and you just have to ask. Now, not everywhere has them, and that's not the case everywhere, but always ask. Just because it seems like they're not accessible or there's not one doesn't mean there's not one hidden somewhere.
Should we give a shout out to the restaurant in Rome because I think they deserve one?
Yes, El Pontifice. It's close to the Vatican.
Close to the Vatican. Yeah, well, with a name like that, you'd expect. Yeah, I mean, I think Italy has a reputation of being difficult in a lot of these type of things, but it's really great to hear your perspective on that and where to find places that will actually be helpful and, you know, provide the experience that you want to have because, you know, you deserve it. Absolutely. You want to have the same, if not better, experience than everyone else. Have you been to the Rinascente? You know, because they have a lot of rooftop areas. I'm wondering if you're able to access those.
I've gone to the Rinascente in Florence, and they do have the rooftop, and it is wheelchair accessible. So there is an elevator to get all the way to the top. It is a very small elevator and my wheelchair fits in perfectly. And so one that's a little bit wider might not make it all the way up.
Okay. Yeah, because I think I mean, I was thinking when you were talking that it's a department store, so they would maybe have some of those facilities that you might not expect everywhere else. And I know there's one in Milan. I'm not sure about the accessibility of their rooftop, but if you can get up there, it's really worthwhile because it's a beautiful view of the Duomo up there.
Yes. And like the coin stores, they're modern. They have restrooms inside. The Vatican has accessible restrooms. So it's just a matter of asking. Like I said, you never know. And also, when you find one, go, even if you don't want to go.
I know it sounds like a little thing, but I'm sure you might regret it later on if you don't.
When we went with my grandmother, that's what we would tell her. Okay, there's a restroom here. Do you want to go? And she would say no. And then half a block later, she wanted to go. Well, there's not one here. Now you have to wait.
And what about restaurants? Because, like, I guess a lot of people's favorite restaurants, you think about them and there's like a few steps to get down. And, you mentioned this one near the Vatican that sounds amazing with this lift. But how do you manage getting into the restaurants that you want to go to? Because I'm sure you don't want to be limited by, the fact that you're in a wheelchair.
So I've found most restaurants pretty accessible. There's lots of options of restaurants that don't have a step to get in, or maybe just have one step. With me, with the manual chair, again, it's very doable to do one step, so that's not an issue for me. There are some restaurants that maybe have 2 or 3 steps, but at those restaurants, they've always been really nice and they're willing to carry me in Cleopatra style, and I'm up for it. Now, not everybody's going to be up for it. And again, if you have a powered wheelchair, then it might be too heavy for them to be able to do that, or more of a risk that the wheelchair might break. So it might not be feasible, but if it's feasible and you're willing to do it, people are always willing to help.
That's so good to hear. All right. So now, Aimee, why don't we have a little bit of a chat about like how most people will be going to the big cities. Let's have a little bit of a chat about how we tackle some of those big cities in a wheelchair, and then maybe go on to some of the smaller places, because I know you've got some very inspiring tips about Siena, which I love. So how about Rome? What can we expect in Rome?
So all of the city centers are generally going to have cobblestones. And yes, it's going to be a bumpier ride. And to me, I'm used to it. I'm fine with it. To me, just kind of like rolling through a park and tree limbs or whatever might be there. It's not an issue for me. For some people, it is an issue. One thing I find that I prefer to push myself. If somebody wants to help me or tries to push me, it seems like when people are pushing you, they kind of push down. So there's more of a likelihood that the small wheels are going to get stuck between the cobblestones and that you might flip out of the wheelchair. So when I navigate the roads, I tend to just look down and concentrate on the cobblestones in front of me and make sure that they're not too separated, or to go around the rougher spots and things like that. And again, I try to not have people push me. Now, if there's like some steps or an uphill, then I might ask someone to help me up. And then again, just paying attention as to how I'm navigating. If it's a downhill, it might be easier to go down backwards, so there's less of a likelihood of flipping out of the wheelchair. There's this thing called a third wheel, that it's a wheel that you can stick at the front of the wheelchair. A lot of people like to use it. I used it last year when I did the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. And for that, to me, it worked very well because we were walking all day. Versus, I can't imagine myself using that in Rome or Florence or some of these other cities where I'm constantly going in and out of shops or in and out of museums, because it is bigger and bulkier and it extends 2 to 3 feet on the wheelchair. And so to me, it's not practical for that. But I have seen people in the touristy cities use it. I'm not sure if they're removing it when they're going into places, because it is fairly easy to remove. And so that, I will say, I I like to roll around everywhere. That way I can explore the streets and get lost in the streets, which is one of the things I love doing. And then that's how I find some unique and yummy restaurants that aren't filled with tourists. And so that's me. Some people prefer to have a taxi because they can't go long distances, or they might prefer to have a driver. That way they can leave you right at the front and pick you up right at the front, and it limits the amount that you're rolling around in some of the cobblestones or the more complicated streets.
Now, you mentioned you stayed right in the heart of Rome, which is near our favourite building, the Pantheon. And Rome around that area is pretty flat too, right? So it's not until you get up towards the Colosseum, up to Monte and the Spanish Steps, where you start getting into steepness.
Correct. So Rome is fairly flat. The area around the Vatican is flat. The area around the Pantheon is flat. I even find, as long as you don't go up the Spanish Steps, like the area in front of it and around it is flat as well. This trip that I was there last month was the first one that I went exploring the Monte neighborhood, and that was steeper, but it was still doable. I was by myself and I was able to push myself up and down the hills by myself without any big issues. Granted, I go a little bit slower when I'm by myself than when I have help pushing up, but there was also people that came across me that would ask me, can we help you? And this time I said, no, thank you, I'm good. Other times I have accepted help. It just depends how tired I am. And I was going really slow because I'm one of those people that stops and takes pictures at every corner because I see a cool plant or a cool window or whatever it might be.
I love it. I'm one of those people too. How about Trastevere? Have you spent much time there?
Yes, I've spent time there. It is fairly flat. The cobblestones are, I would say, rougher in that area, but it is still doable, again, as long as you go slow and steady. And I found that the shops and the restaurants in the area were accessible, as well as the church that's right there in Trastevere.
It's a beautiful church, isn't it? It's absolutely stunning.
Yes.
So you mentioned as well the Vatican, and I've been there with a friend who has a walking stick, and they were very helpful to her. And there's a lot of different ways you can get around in the Vatican too, isn't there?
There is, and to get to the Sixtine Chapel, there is an accessible route, and one of the people from there will escort you once you're ready to go and see the Sistine Chapel. The thing that I would say is different from my understanding is most people get out of the Sistine Chapel and there's a route to get to St. Peter's Basilica through the inside. When you're in a wheelchair, you can't do that same route. You have to exit the museums and then come around the outside to the front to get into St. Peter's, but you do get to skip all of the line. So that's nice.
Yeah, well, it's quite a long way around the back there. It's not a short little trip, so you definitely deserve to skip the line there.
And then once you're inside of St. Peter's Basilica, there's a rooftop, which a lot of people don't know, and there's actually an accessible route elevator to get to the rooftop. So you could get the views up there, which are beautiful.
They are really stunning. I was there last year on a very hot day. And yes, you're right. It's quite a large elevator there to go up onto the roof of St. Peter's. That's a really good point. The other big, obviously, site that people want to see in Rome is the Colosseum. And I know it does have an elevator there.
Yes, it has an elevator. So when people say it can't be made accessible because it's old and we don't want to ruin it, I'm like, the Colosseum has an elevator. If they were able to manage to put one in the Colosseum without ruining it, you can get one here. So yes, the Colosseum is very accessible. It has an elevator to go up. And now I was just reading that now they opened a new elevator to go up to the upper level that just opened like within this last week or two.
Amazing.
So I'm going to have to go back when I go in November.
No problem. There's always something new to see at the Colosseum.
I'll come back and report.
We need you to do that. Absolutely. Yeah, so I think it sounds like Rome is pretty good to get around. And there's also, have you been to the Altare della Patria? There's a lift to get up on the roof there too. I don't know if you've been.
Yes, there's an elevator to get up, and actually there's a fee, but if you're in a wheelchair, they don't charge you either.
Excellent.
Yes, you can get up there. There's also an elevator to go down into the forum. And then I found the baths to be, where the Roman baths are, to be very accessible too, because they've made platforms, so you're not really rolling over the gravel. Everybody's walking on these platforms, so it's actually smoother.
Amazing. Is that the Baths of Caracalla, that one?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that site. It's one of my favourites in Rome. And then, of course, if you're in the Colosseum Forum area, the Capitoline Museums, I'm sure, although getting up that hill, or is there a back entrance?
That's one of my tricks, kind of what I did in Siena. I had a taxi take me there. And then I went into the museums. And then when I left, I just rolled down. I will say that one is quite steep, so you want to be careful. And I rolled down backwards to make it safer and not flip out.
Oh, yeah, good idea. I don't know, like, I think I would find that very difficult because I don't like anything speedy. Like, so it sounds like going down backwards is a very good tip.
I would say it's good to have gloves on your hands so that you don't mess up your hands.
Another good tip. I love it. I mean, and Florence is your hometown, so is that an easy place to get around and see things?
Florence is fairly flat. To me, I find it very easy to get around again, it's the cobblestones. The cobblestones in Florence are different than the cobblestones in Rome. And so it's just kind of adjusting from one to the other ones. The one in Rome are flatter and bigger. And so it's kind of adjusting how you have to roll around them. Again, you have to look at the ground, make sure that there's not any big gaps where you might get stuck or flip out of your chair. One thing that I've noticed that they've been doing in Florence is they've been doing a lot of street improvements. So some of the streets, the cobblestones have been reset, so they're much smoother than they used to be. And so that's something that's nice. One tip anywhere in Italy, and I would say anywhere in the world, which makes people nervous, is the sidewalks. Not all of them have curb cuts at the end, or sometimes there's cars parked on the sidewalks, or sometimes they become very narrow so you can't get down them. I like to roll on the street a lot. It makes people a lot really nervous. But to me, you also have to be a conscious person. If you're going to make the choice to roll on the street, then you need to be alert for taxis and cars coming, and also understand that they have the right of way. So kind of scoot over and let them go by.
I mean, I can tell that that's a calculated risk for you, but it's fine because in most of those centre areas, there's very small number of vehicles that are going down there.
Well, and sometimes there's like in Florence, one of the main roads, it has huge buses that run by it. And so the road's already narrow. You have the buses. And if you're there, I usually like try to squeeze in between two cars that are parked to get out of the bus's way and not risk the bus making it around me.
You're so inspiring. Honestly, just fearless. Just go. I'm going down this street like an Italian Ferrari driver.
Yes.
And I made it. Don't let the bus stop me. Amazing. And I mean, yeah, so Florence is doable as well. What about in like the Duomo? Is there an elevator in the Duomo?
To get into the Duomo in Florence, the entrance is actually around the side in the back, and there's a ramp to get in. So there's not an elevator, there's a ramp to get in, and then you can go inside of the Duomo. There is not an elevator to get up to the actual dome part, but you can go inside and visit the church. And most of the big churches in Florence have some type of accessible entrance with a ramp on the side, like Santa Croce, Santa Maria Novella, Santo Spirito. So they're all accessible.
Oh, that's great. I mean, because, if you want to go see some art, you just roll yourself into the church. I mean, Santa Croce is one of my favourites. It's got so many surprises around every corner there. It's something that I think everyone should go see.
Yes. And then the Courtyard Museum on the side, that has an accessible entrance too.
Oh, Oh, I'm picturing it now. Yes, indeed it does. And so let's talk about a city that people might find very disconcerting if they're in a wheelchair, that doesn't have any traffic, any car traffic. It's Venice, and this is a city of over 400 bridges. Now, that sounds like a challenge.
So I have been to Venice and I did find it challenging. They do have a map that kind of marks the accessible routes. I'm really good with maps and I found the map confusing. I'm the kid that loved maps, still loves maps, had globes and everything, always growing up. But that map was very confusing to me. One of the things too is it'll show you the routes, but then some of them depend on you getting on the Vaporetto at one point and then getting off at a different point to get from one, I guess you could call it from one island to the next island. And then the map shows more the route within the island that's accessible. Some of the bridges are supposed to have or have like these little elevators, but there's keys to them. I could never figure out where to get the keys. There are companies that do accessible tours of the island. I think if I were ever to go back or decide to stay there for the night, I would hire one of those companies to do a tour so that I could kind of figure it out how it works. And then, once I see them do it, then I'll know how to get around. Like I said, I did find it challenging. I've read that the best time to go, which I've never done it, and I'll have to do it one day and report back again, is when they do the marathon. So I believe maybe a week or two before the Venice Marathon and for a week or two after, they set up ramps for the runners across all of the bridges. So they start setting up the ramps, I think, a week or two before, and then they remove them a week or two after. That's what I've read. I'm not sure what the timeline. You'd probably want to confirm that with locals before going. So it makes the city much more accessible because there's no stairs on the bridges. It's all ramps. And the marathon used to happen in November. I checked it before we got on the call. This year it's at the end of October, and it seems like last year was the end of October. So you would want to look ahead and then kind of plan your trip around that. I would suggest that.
That's a great tip. I guess the other thing to note, though, is that some of those bridges are pretty steep. So you'd want to either get some help, maybe getting up them and then roll down backwards.
Exactly.
So you don't topple over. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I think, Venice is one of those places. Yeah, sounds like it might be a good idea to get some professional help. What can we expect about tours that cater to people that are in wheelchairs? I've seen there's a few companies pop up lately, and what's your impression?
The only tour specially designed for wheelchairs that I've done was in Machu Picchu, Peru. Everywhere else in the world, I've just kind of gone in, looked for the tours, kind of try to figure out what they do, where they see, and then I write the tour company or the tour guide or whoever's organizing that particular tour, and I say, I'm in a wheelchair, like I can do one step, maybe even two steps with some help. And, like I can pop the chair in the trunk, I can transfer. I give them as much information as possible. And then they tell me, yes, we could do it. It's accessible, or we'll figure it out, or we'll find help. And that's always how I've booked it and I've done it. So again, when I do reviews on TripAdvisor, I like to put, this tour was accessible. And I've had really good luck and success with that, from doing food tours to wineries visits to hiring private drivers, different things like that. It's always worked for me. I've never had an issue. And if a company's not responsive or they respond right away, like, oh, we don't do tours for people in wheelchairs, or if they have it on their website, like no wheelchairs or no strollers, then I don't even bother approaching them, because if they don't want my business, I don't want to give them my money.
Sounds reasonable to me. Yeah, I guess it's really interesting that people have seen maybe an opportunity to cater specifically towards people that are in wheelchairs. And I've had some feedback from people that have written into me that some of them, they haven't been on them, but they seem quite expensive. But I can't make a comment. Do you have an impression about that?
I've seen tours that cater for people in wheelchairs, but it's more like a complete trip planning. And I think they do tend to be very expensive, like double or triple for what I could plan it on my own. And they also seem to be more limited into the things that they do or where they go. Like a lot of them, I'll give you an example. That's not like a group tour for wheelchairs, but when you're on a cruise, generally most of the tours are not accessible. If there's a tour that they call as accessible, basically they have you sitting on a bus or a van all day and you just drive around and you see. It's not really getting up and down and out and actually seeing and exploring the sites.
All right. So, I mean, what I'm hearing from you, Aimee, is that if you have a little bit of creativity and a bit of flexibility, that you can really tackle this stuff on your own. How about some of the smaller places? You mentioned Siena, and you really blew my mind when you told me about that. So I'd love our listeners to hear what you did in Siena.
So Siena is a very, very steep city. We went as a day trip from Florence, took the train, got to the train station. At the train station, I got a taxi, had him take me all the way up to the cathedral in Siena. And is it a cathedral in Siena? Is it considered a cathedral or I can't? Okay.
Yeah, it is.
So I had the taxi take me up to the cathedral in Siena. Once I was up there, went in, saw it. It is accessible. So is the museum across from the cathedral. And then I just started going down the city because that's basically at the top of the city. And so it was just easy to roll down. Now, some of the streets or sections where I was rolling down were very steep. And again, there's cobblestones, so you have to be careful, but it is doable. There was a few where I went down and then maybe I had to go back up, but it was much easier than having started at the bottom and having to push all the way up. I might have had, 2 or 3 hills versus 100.
I mean, I reckon you easily deserve 3 or 4 gelato a day just by rolling yourself around. There's a lot of muscle work happening there, I'm sure. Amazing.
And then with San Gimignano, it's steep. So as you get into the town, you go up, and then on the other end, you're going to go down. And so if you have enough upper body strength, then I did it up and down by myself this last time I was there last month. But it's also, if you have somebody with you that can help you push, it's very doable. And then most of the shops have no steps or one step to get in. So if you wanted to go in and explore, you can.
And if you went with someone and they were driving, are you able to use like a disabled sticker like they have in some parts of the world? Like here in Australia, if you, so my dad, for example, he's got limited mobility, so he has a sticker that he can access certain car spaces. Is that possible in Italy?
I don't know. I know that Italy has placards that they issue for people to be able to use the handicap parking. Every time I say I'm going to take my US one and see if they'll allow me to use it, and every time I forget, since I don't use a car much over there. But that's one of the things that I've been trying to figure out, if they would allow me to use my US one there, or if somebody's coming from another country, if they would allow you to use your placard from that country. I don't know the answer to that.
You can report back on that one too.
Yes, I will report back on that.
Fantastic. And then the other place that I was thinking of that would be like, I don't even know where you'd start, but I do know that you, Aimee, would have a solution. It would be the Amalfi Coast and places like Positano. Have you ever attempted that?
So yes. So what we did, it was actually my first trip to Italy. It was part of a cruise stop. We hired a driver to take us to the Amalfi Coast. We stopped in Sorrento. I was able to roll through Sorrento. That was not a problem. And then we went to Positano. That is going to be more challenging because it is very steep and it's all these stairs. There was a section of street where the driver left us and I was able to explore some shops. So it is doable for a visit. I would probably not stay there unless the hotel's right off the main road. And then I know for sure that the hotel's accessible, because then I know I'm also going to be probably more confined to that hotel than just like a few shops and restaurants. We went from there to the town of Amalfi, and then that had some areas and shops which were accessible. Again, it's doable for a few hours. I probably wouldn't stay there overnight. And then I've stayed in Naples. Naples is very accessible. And then took the ferry to Capri. The ferry is accessible. And then once in Capri, I was able to do a boat tour to go around the island and see the Blue Grotto. The boat was not per se accessible, but I was able to jump out from my chair and get into the boat, and they helped me. And then they left my wheelchair in a shop. And then once we got back, they helped me get again out of the boat and into my chair, and my chair was waiting for me.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad you had that experience. It's one of my favorites in the world.
And then the funicular up to the island from where the ferry leaves you is accessible. So you can go up into the island and explore it. And the same thing for Orvieto, the funicular is accessible. So you could go to Orvieto by train, take the funicular up, and then explore the city.
Another one of my favorite places in Italy, where it's a beautiful town. Oh, that's so cool. Aimee, you are amazing, and I just love that you just don't let anything stop you and you found ways. I think it's really inspiring. Just, you know, we have a big Facebook group of travellers, and we hear a lot of petty grievances on that every day, but I really feel like that anything can be overcome with a positive attitude and just a bit of creativity. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and experience travelling in Italy. I know many people will have found this discussion extremely helpful. If our listeners had any questions, would you be happy for them to reach out to you?
Yes, they can reach out to me through my Instagram account, which is Whirling the World, and just send me a DM through there, and I will be happy to help them in any way I can.
And I think it sounds like you've got a really good process of reviewing places on TripAdvisor. Do you do that regularly?
I used to be much better at it. I'm like 2 years behind on my reviews. I need to go back and finish reviewing everything that I've done these last 2 years.
I know we had a bit of a pause there, didn't we? Let's not mention the pause, but it's probably worth going back and it'd be great to hear your reviews.
I was actually one of the few people that was traveling throughout the pandemic. It was kind of nice because nowhere was crowded.
I know you're having to give up your quiet Florence now. Oh, it's a shame. Oh, grazie, Aimee. Thank you so much for sharing all your deep insight and for joining us on Untold Italy today. It's been truly inspirational to hear how you travel through Italy with such a positive attitude and just with your eyes wide open and just enjoying every last minute. I love it. Thank you, Aimee.
Grazie a te. It's been a pleasure.
You know what? I think Aimee is amazing, but I also think it shouldn't require so much effort in terms of planning, thinking, cost, and physical exertion on her part to have the experiences that so many of us take for granted. There are a lot of news reports these days about the crowds and heat in Italy, and I stop to wonder how Aimee would manage it. Probably with a big smile on her face and no complaints, which is more that can be said for some of us who have fewer challenges, unfortunately. I think it's going to take a much bigger effort on the part of able-bodied people as a collective to make things much easier for people who are travelling with a disability to have an easier time. But in the meantime, let's take a leaf out of the Italian attitude and offer to help individuals where we can, just to make people's lives that much easier. It doesn't take much, does it? Now, if you're keen to learn more about accessible travel in Italy or are inspired to pack your bags, now you've heard these on-the-ground ideas for getting around and enjoying yourself when you get there, we've put all the tips, ideas and links Aimee shared, as well as her social media links, into the show notes on our website at untolditaly.com/183 for episode number 183. Grazie mille. Thank you so much for your ongoing support of Untold Italy. We truly appreciate all of you, our listeners, joining us from all around the world. And we would love it if you help spread the word so we can reach more Italy-loving travelers just like you. The best way that you can do this is by leaving us a 5-star rating or review on your favourite podcast app, or forwarding this episode onto a friend who also loves colourful towns, delightful local customs, and the magic of regional Italy. That's all for today. Next week, Danielle Atteri and I will be chatting about the summer season so far in Italy and takeaways for those of you who are travelling soon or thinking about a summer trip to Italy next year or in future years to come. But until then, it's ciao for now.
The Untold Italy podcast is an independent production. Podcast editing, audio production, and website development by Mark Hatter, production assistance and content writing by the other Katie Clark. Yes, there are two of us. For more information about Untold Italy, please visit untolditaly.com.